So
Cool.
I
Okay,
have
push this
been
over close. Okay, in the middle.
Joanne will tell it. How's the volume, Joanne? Uh-oh,
It's
can't
not there.
hear anything.
You're muted.
I think that a lot of it is when more than one person is talking at a time. When one person's talking, I can really hear well. But when several people are talking, I think that's when it really kind of echoes and it's harder to differentiate. So
I understand. So let's see how this goes. These noble truths are very um, um, important in the Theraveda traditions. So I went to Theraveda authors. One of my favorites, of course, uh, uh, and that is Rahula. And he he points out that a good Buddhist has two things to consider: compassion on the one hand and wisdom on the other. Neither of them are directly directed at actions, but they certainly influence things. And so here we have compassion and we have wisdom. Uh, the compassion, if it's based in wisdom, shows itself through these actions that are noble truths and or truths for the noble person, as is said in well, actually in one of the other texts that I read. So it brings the noble back to the person rather than to the truth. That as you pay attention to these things, you're noble, or you're ennobled in some ways there. Now, uh, these actions imply precepts. So I was looking for precepts, not vague general words, but rather some specific actions. And so I get to the Dalai Lama and he says, my religion is kindness. Where's the action? But, you know, Lions Roar magazine, Rebecca Lee says, actions, you must be refraining from causing serious harm. Come back to that later, okay? I'd like to hear some thoughts on that. So Monday nights, we recite the Metta Sutta, do not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. This is still not very specific, is it? You've got to know something about wisdom again. We have the 16 precepts, but they start with cease from evil, do only good, do good for others. A little more specific, right? How about some specific things said by some of the monks from Sri Lanka? Rahula says, abstain from taking life. And he elaborates on that. Abstain from taking what is not given. Recognize that? Abstain from sexual misconduct. We recognize that as part of our precepts. Where are the other precepts? I don't know. Bhikkhu Bodhi has the same three. Just those three: abstain from taking life, abstain from taking what is not given, abstain from sexual misconduct. I mean, certainly. So there are other sources with those three, and then I get to Thanissaro Bhikkhu, and he quotes the Magga Vimanga Sutta, which is an analysis of the path. And listen to the beginning and the part and an excerpt from that sutta. I have heard that at one time the Blessed One was staying in Savatthi at Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery, There he addressed the monks, saying, "Monks." And the monks reply, "Yes, Lord." And the Blessed One says, "I will teach and analyze for you the noble eightfold path. Listen and pay close attention. I will speak." And in this speaking, he says, "And what, monks, is right action? Abstaining from taking life, abstaining from stealing, abstaining from unchastity. This, monks, is called right action." That explains why Rahu only quotes the three, and the same for Bhikkhu Bodhi and others. Uh, it's fun to go back to the sources occasionally. That's not the only Theravada monk that I consulted. I didn't go out and talk with Frau Woody, but I did reread as much as I could the book he gave me from his master. And you would recognize the abstain from killing, abstain from sexual misconduct, and abstain from taking what is not given. Here is right action: to ardently cultivate mindfulness until it becomes sustained mindfulness, to not get entangled with tanha, with craving, to not cling to the five aggregates, keep penetrating ignorance until you're able to cut through ignorance and into pure knowing. And as the pure knowing is discovered, stay abiding in the voidness and the clarity and the purity. Remain in the middle way. This is easier to understand. Remain in the middle way between the two extremes of self-indulgence or the starving yourself asceticism. I really ought to go out and talk to Frau Woody about this. Well, or rather ask him a question and listen to it. Back to the three. Pretty, if that's all, if those are the only three you had, you could go a long ways. That's, I mean, I'm not going to elaborate on the three, but you can.
Oh, we have a stick. Except in the last source, none of those were phrased in a positive manner. They're all what not to do. Did you encounter much what to do?
No, but I think the what to do comes out in back to wisdom and compassion.
I noticed the same thing. And I thought of how when we do our 16 Bodhisattva precepts, there is the prohibitive and then always the positive. So do not kill, cultivate and encourage life. Do not steal, honor the gift not yet given, etc. So because I noticed that too, what not to do. Well, they do just sit there and not do anything. That's probably worked. But the precepts get a lot more specific. And you got 16 of them because there's more than 3 things that can go wrong in your life. Right? And there was something else. I'll think of it.
Does anybody online have anything they want to add to the discussion?
I tuned in a little late. I'm trying to catch up. Oh, my video's off.
So I'm assuming this is just one sutta, right? The Magga Vibhana Sutta. And all he says in this sutta is, what is right action, monks? Abstaining from taking life, abstaining from stealing, abstaining from unchastity. This is what is called right action. But for 40 years, he was saying, oh, he was speaking to the specific needs of the people he was speaking to. And that's a lot of speaking. This is just a little bit of speaking. That's why I'm gonna say we should elaborate on this in a positive way. Uh, and back to wisdom and compassion.
Do you suppose that one of the reasons he only spoke in the negative is because they were monks? And therefore the behavior was for the most part right and regimented? This is your life, this is what you do?
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes good sense. That and
Well, to me, there's a lot more things you shouldn't do. You know, yeah, he didn't tell you what to do, but he only listed 3 things you're not supposed to do. So you can lie, you can cheat, you can't steal, but you can speed on the freeway. There's plenty of things that you can still do. So I wonder why there was only 3.
was that last bit of question I didn't get. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm asking why there were only 3 things.
Why? Just
Only 3 things.
Shokai, could you repeat the 3 things really quickly? Because I sort of,
the 3 things in this sutta. The Blessed One said, I will teach and analyze for you the Noble Eightfold Path. Listen and pay close attention. And what, monks, is right action? It is abstaining from taking life, abstaining from stealing, abstaining from unchastity. This, monks, is called right action. This is a translation by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who is an American monk, studied in Sri Lanka and is a translator. So it's his translation.
You know, different traditions have a different list, a different length of list. So we have the 16 precepts. This sutta has 3. They don't call them precepts, but three rules for conduct. I think that Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition has 5. So it isn't cast in stone. I mean, I don't know why this monk lists, or this sutra lists 3, but I'm kind of with Glenn, like there's a whole lot of things that aren't covered by those 3 rules. And Dogen, in his rules for monks for his monastery, had, Joshin would know, hundreds of rules.
Yeah.
Rules about how to walk, rules about how to go to the bathroom. I mean, a zillion rules. So, yeah,
that seems very zen, that there'd be a lot of rules. Sorry, oh, I'm supposed to hold the stick. That's all. Sorry. I can't help myself.
2 things to address Glenn's comment. I'm sorry, they cited it come earlier, but when Keiko was mentioning the precepts and how we do deal with more things, not lying would be counted under right speech, which is why it didn't come into the actions. And we already discussed right speech last week, I guess.
Yeah.
So not speeding, I'm not sure where that comes. And also, Oh, Dogen, if you listen very carefully to the Shobogenzo, he is talking about, for instance, in his in the passage called washing, he is talking very intricately about the details of bathing. But if you listen very carefully, he's talking about a lot more than that. A lot more than that. He's talking very deep philosophical concepts. Well, indeed, talking about the minutiae of bathing. You just have to listen.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking we would get into, okay, what do you understand about action?
Can I say something? I, your comment, Dixie, made me think about something, and it's already, this is why I blurt things out, because now I've already forgotten it. So not speeding, could that, okay, so if you're, I mean, in some cases, maybe speeding is okay, right? Because maybe you're trying to get to the hospital, or that speeding is technically, you're doing something that is against the law. And perhaps that could be interpreted as, I don't know, like lying, or, you know, if you're doing something that is against the law, maybe it falls under another action, or under noble truth. What is it? But not noble truth, but yes. I guess.
Pure precepts.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just a thought that kind of popped into my head. Does anybody want to talk? Oh yeah, Dennis, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly how this was worded, but there was a Chinese guy that preceded Dogen, and I don't remember his name, but he was asked, what is the essence of Buddhist teachings? In other words, what do you have to do to be a good Buddhist? And he said, it's your response, which I think boils it down to just about everything. I mean, we talked about 3 things. We have 16 precepts, different lineages have different numbers, but it really boils down to your response to life. Wisdom, compassion, and all that good stuff. It didn't go over so well, I guess.
We're mulling it over.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, I mean, really, we talked about intention. I mean, it really kind of all, yeah, it boils down to.
Every one of the precepts ends up being your response, how you respond to a particular situation.
I just didn't want to rush you. I didn't want to grab the stick away if you were done.
Stick. So what you said, Dennis, makes me think of an idea I had about yeah, if you were going to explain Zen to somebody, you know, your elevator speech on Zen, what would it be? An elevator speech being a very short, the time it takes to, you know, go whatever 10 floors in an elevator, and somebody asked you what is Zen, which you probably had that happen, right? How many of you guys have somebody said what is Zen to you?
Mhm.
What is Buddhism?
Don't be a dick.
Yeah. It looks like Chon has her hand raised, Chon.
Yeah, so I was looking up because because I was a little with the three things, and then Takeo, you had said, well, I think there's more depending on, you know, who, what you're reading or what you're looking at. And when I looked it up, you know, some of the Noble Eightfold Path, in the right action, no action harming others, action that are helping others, being aware of your actions that can be helpful in situations that are harmful to others. So just an awareness, to awareness that is needed to identify some right action that should be happening. And then it kind of tied in back to the right speech and right thoughts. Buddhism holds that our thoughts influence our actions. So here we had already talked about, you know, the right speech and right actions before, and that how they're really just kind of a continuation of our thoughts, being in the moment, paying attention to what we're thinking before we act. So I thought that was interesting, but it did have a longer list of do not kill, steal, cheat, engage in sexual misconduct. So it was, you know, depending on what reading or where you kind of look, there some pull out some other things in the actions, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
So what I'm reminded of is, it sounds like being mindful. That's the first thing, which goes back to wisdom. If you have wisdom and are mindful, you're probably going to be on the right path.
But compassion, you have to have that.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not sure why Buddhists separate wisdom and compassion. It seems to me like you could collapse those into one thing. But Buddhism always separates wisdom and compassion. And mindfulness without compassion, you get the situation where the army uses mindfulness training to train its snipers. Seriously. So you know, yeah, have that.
All right. How about mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom?
Yeah.
You said that we were gonna come back to something. It was about, significant harm.
Significant harm.
And
Yeah.
what I have to say about that, I don't understand significant harm. I would think it would just be do no harm.
Do no harm. Yes. And this is what Rebecca Lee pulled out of the Noble Truth. And it struck me. Well, I mean, it struck me because of the Metta-sutta that we recite Mondays. Do not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. That implies that we have that wisdom inside us, and it's not some other wise person who's going to call you out for your mistake, your uncompassionate action. It's yourself. But I was kind of amused at Rebecca Lee's saying, refrain from causing serious harm. And that was the entire quote. I didn't leave anything out. She explained in the paragraph what right action meant, and then her capping sentence was that one. I thought, yeah, that's good.
Well, when you say significant, serious, sometimes compassion does mean harm. Not necessarily malicious harm, but sometimes it does. Like
Denying compassion.
no, that sometimes you do have to cause harm to be compassionate.
Oh,
And I don't really ascribe to the practice, but I know that tough love, for instance, is all about that.
what the wise would later reprove. These are good phrases in our tradition.
Did you? I was just gonna say, if we're talking about tough love, it may cause pain. Question is it really harm?
Good
And
point.
so, and so I think there's a distinction between that. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, okay, I agree. No, that was running in the back of my mind when you said cause harm in order because it's pain. One would hope it's not harm. If it's harmful, then was it wise?
I remember, thank you. So, yeah, what the wise would later reprove, begs the question, who is the panel of the wise? Who are they? Do they all agree? Is there such a thing as who do I ask? Who do I exactly ask? So I do have kind of a practice of consulting certain wise people in my mind on issues. Like what would Kyogen do, for instance, or say? So maybe that's what that means.
I'm also reminded, I don't have the exact quote and I can't bring it to mind, but I'm reminded of I think it's the Buddha talking to his son Rahul about what is good to do and what isn't good to do. If anyone remembers that one, sorry, it's a good one. Basically it goes just through what is good to do and what is not good to do and how to determine whether something is good or not good.
That rings a bell.
There needs to be a wise AI. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Is this bad? Is this good? I don't know.
Well, that's also what teachers are for, probably.
How are you all doing online there? Any thoughts?
Who's the third person?
Dennis.
Peter?
Dennis.
No, Dennis and Joanne, and who's the third?
Oh, that's us.
What?
Us. It's just the group.
One of the things that, when I was looking through and reading that one portion, it reminded me of what you had said, how it had the positive and negative in our precepts. We have both. And one of the things that it said is when we're talking about not doing harm, the opposite of is loving touch. Just keeping in mind that in our actions that we're doing it with a loving touch, which also is that positive and negative are the opposite.
My mother used to say, when she spanked me, I'm doing this because I love you. That didn't help. So, I mean, to me, she was causing harm. So I don't know.
What people say is not necessarily what is not necessarily reflected in their actions. Do as I say, not as I do. I don't.
Yeah, she said that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, tell on what you were saying and just kind of what was brought up. reminds me of our talk was it last week when we talked about the right speech?
Mhm.
And I almost feel like you could make a flow chart based on what Buddha, when you should speak. I mean, there's like specific, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's very specific times when you should speak and how you should determine.
Is it kind? Is it?
I don't have, yeah, I wrote it all down, but my phone is being used for this. Yeah, there's like, yeah, exactly, is what you're gonna say, the truth. Is it, just all these different things, and I think it's, yeah, this discussion kind of reminds me of that a little bit, because maybe action can sort of be used in the same, you could use that same sort of flow chart in the same way. Like if you're spanking your child, you love your child because you're spanking your child, maybe you could ask yourself, well, is this going to hurt my child? I don't know, you know what I mean, before you do it. And well, yeah, it is, it's going to cause harm, it's going to cut, so maybe I shouldn't spank my child. I don't know, just like an idea.
I already forgot what I was gonna say.
See, that was the problem of the stick, is like, I didn't
She
see.
has to pick a big one.
Looks like Chillin has something to say, she's got her hand up.
So
Big-
what keeps coming back to me is this, kind of like the tough love, that Dixie was bringing up, how sometimes we do have to, there's consequences for children. There are a lot of times that we're doing it out of love, we're doing it out of care, and I don't know, I just think that is a reality of when, I think what the differentiating part is doing no harm. So when we're doing it out of love, when we're doing it, tough love, we're doing, there's some consequences. I mean, I was just talking to somebody the other day about when my kiddo stole from Safeway when he was like, I think he was like first or second grade or something, I can't remember. And I had to march him down to Safeways, and he had to fess up, and he had some consequences. Um, in his mind, I did harm by doing that. In my mind, I was not doing harm. I was, giving him, doing one of those parental lessons, teaching my child that there was consequences. But in his mind, to this day, he will bring it up that it was embarrassing, that, it was really hard for him, that I did harm to him by doing that. And so I guess sometimes, even when we really are trying not to do harm and we're doing things out of compassion and love, and I mean, that loving touch, I mean, I could have handled that in a very different way if I was a different parent or an abusive parent or whatever. There could have definitely been no loving touch, not doing it with compassion. It could have been, there could have been a very harsh um, penalty for doing that. And so I guess there's always that kind of evaluating also that comes with that, when we do have to do something that we feel like is out of love and compassionate and the right thing to do, but the other person might think that we've harmed them. It's just kind of something that to think about, to chew on.
So that's what I was gonna say, which is that there's a difference between discipline and punishment. What you were talking about, I would call punishment, but you could still have discipline for somebody taking from Safeway. I'm not a parent, I'm not thinking of what it would be at the moment, but anyway, the difference between discipline and punishment.
Well, I think Lexi pretty well put it well. You said there's a difference between, did you say causing discomfort and causing harm or something?
Pain.
Did you- Pain. Yeah, yeah.
But
It's also where some of these functions we're talking about is where what we need is wisdom in really looking at what is the best way to do whatever it is we're trying to accomplish. And that's where it's always difficult to know what that wisdom truly is.
To throw a bit of confusion into it and add pets, we put them down when they're in too much pain, and that's a good example of behaving compassionately,
Right.
but causing harm, but compassionately. But staying and neutering, are we being compassionate to them, or are we just making our lives easier? Where is the line? Where do we start judging what is harm and what is compassion, and who are we being less harm to?
Looks like Dennis has his hand up. Dennis?
Yes, I found the quote. I kind of didn't get it quite right. But asked of Master Human, what is the teaching of the whole life of Buddha? And the answer was an appropriate response. And I think what everybody is talking about, what all of the, the 200 and something rules that Dogen set down for monks, the Eightfold Path, the 16 precepts, all that is to guide you towards an appropriate response. And that's kind of helped me personally, before you react, before you think, before you speak. Is that an appropriate response?
So maybe one of the things from what we've been saying would be to talk to the child that's stolen something, knowing that there are always consequences, positive or negative, and what would be an appropriate consequence here for any, not just for shoplifting, but whatever.
I think there's nothing wrong with consulting someone that you consider wise if it's if it's a big question, should I put, should I have my dog euthanized? How do I deal with my child shoplifting? So I think it's a good idea to have a cabinet of wise people in your head, and maybe they're living and you can actually call them up and have coffee and discuss it. Maybe they are not living anymore, but you can imagine what maybe they would say. I think that's a good practice.
And that's called wisdom.
Yeah, we're seeking wisdom. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
wisdom to be seeking.
I guess that's so.
That made me relate to here is a teacher who, in talking about right action, doesn't mention any of the three, but in several different ways, cultivating mindfulness until it becomes sustained mindfulness, not being affected by craving, which leads to suffering, destroying or penetrating through ignorance, finding pure knowing by keeping the mind in the middle way without getting entangled in the two. But he's in right action. I see this as going to wisdom without mentioning the actions. Cultivating mindfulness until it becomes sustained mindfulness. That's an action, but it's an internal action. But it's interesting that in none of the noble truths as he elaborates on them, and that's not all that he's elaborating on in this particular book. Does he conform to some of the other Buddhist teachers that I didn't realize that until I started reading again. I thought, no, got to go talk to Woody.
There were so many teachers. I think we have to decide for ourselves, this teacher says this and this and this and this, that we have to decide for ourselves. We have to cultivate our own wisdom.
I believe there's a sutta that says that.
We do.
The Buddha's teaching to the Kalamas. And they came to him with that question. There are so many teachers, and he said, the essence of that one was, you have to figure it out for yourself.
And it's good to consult your wise people. I mean, it's good to have a basis on which to figure it out for yourself. So in a sense, you know, study, go to school, read. I mean, because an appropriate response kind of isn't that helpful for me. Everybody thinks they're a good person, and everybody's trying to do their best. So, yeah, I mean, that's a little squishy for me.
Sean?
What that reminds me of, have you ever been in a situation where you've told somebody something over and over and over, and then somebody else tells them the exact same thing, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes off for them, and they're like, yeah, that's totally, and you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I've said that for years to you and you never heard it. And I think that happens with our teachers too. I think the way it's presented, sometimes we grasp it where we might have read six books of Dharma teaching, and one teacher, one book, we read it and it comes through in a way that we totally, all of a sudden the light bulb goes off, where those other 5 books maybe it didn't. And so I think that it's a benefit when we have all these different teachers. And I do think, like Takeo, you were saying, I have some friends that have been like social workers in elementary school. They've worked with kids. If I would have had that kind of support when my kids were knee high, when they were going through elementary school, it would have been so helpful to go to somebody that had some wisdom, that I could have said, like when in that situation, when my kiddo went and stole candy down at Safeway's, I could have said, man, what would be what do you suggest in handling this situation? So I agree. I think that it goes back to what Dennis was saying again. It's like every time almost every week when we have discussion, the pause comes up. Thinking before we react, that right action, that appropriate action, just pausing and thinking before we react, comes up with every teaching. And going to a wise teacher before we act, and just kind of chewing on it for a minute, it probably really it could be considered that pause.
Yes, when you said that, I love the teaching of the pause. I always think about that too. And I think about the precepts and how each of the precepts has the pause. And whenever we study the precepts, it kind of jumps out at me. But the precepts also have one of the parts of the precepts that really I love, that I've just grown to really love, is contrition, and this whole act of just showing up, and how that's like everything. I mean, nothing happens unless you show up. And within the contrition section, it talks about how we have our ancestors to back us up. They're there to they have our backs, so yeah, it all kind of fits together. Beautiful. Well, we have like 3 minutes.
Before we end, can we ask Dennis, with the new microphone, you're here usually, always on Zoom. Does it sound different to you tonight? Could you hear better tonight? Did you notice a difference?
Yes, yes, it sounded much better. In fact, I noticed people passing around the block to talk. I thought they were passing around the microphone at first because the sound was so much better.
Oh, good. Good feedback, thanks.
I don't know how many, if anybody has seen Roshi Kenneth's version of the precepts, but she refers to a source of wisdom inside oneself called the Lord of the House.
What?
The Lord of the House is how she refers to that source of inner wisdom. And she does recommend that you consult it before taking any action.
Oh, I love that. The Lord of the House. Wow. I gotta look that up.
Sounds masculine.
I was just gonna say, it sounds nerdy to me, like Dungeons and Dragons or something. I don't. Love it though.
I think we have to honor Roshi Kenneth's background in the Church of England.
Yeah.
And I think she brought quite a bit of the good parts from that. Part of my background. I recognize this and I recognize that. So, without twitching.
All right. Well, we're out of time. What do you wanna do?
About time.
Wait, Shokai, do you want to give us a closing first?
The universe is as the boundless sky. Just as the lotus is not wetted by the water that surrounds it, the mind is pure and goes beyond. Thus we bow to Buddha.
All
the
Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, Maha Prajna Paramita. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, you
Thank
guys.
you.
Good night.
Right on.
Good
Thank
night,
you for the
everybody.
feedback. Good night.
Good night.
Night, John. I think we picked a good one, honey. Selection.
I like the idea of the stick. That was a great
It
idea.
is a good idea.
Works very well on circle on the floor.